You ever walk into a building and feel like you belong there, like the key in your pocket and the appointment on your calendar are enough to prove it? That morning, I did. I had my notes, my boarding pass, my worn leather wallet with the corporate cards tucked inside, and a meeting that had been on the calendar for weeks. And then, in 3 sentences, everything unraveled. A woman stepped in front of me, grabbed my bag, called me a vagrant, and told security to throw me off the executive floor. You know what I mean? Yeah, that happened. Act 1. The hook. I'm Daniel Reed, and I was supposed to lead a negotiation that could have changed my company's future. I walked up to the 23rd floor of Northfield Technologies' marble floors, glass doors that corporate smell of coffee and old money, and a manager named Karen Blake planted herself in the doorway like she owned the hall. Her manicure flashed, her shoes clicked, and she pointed at my jeans like I'd committed a crime. "Security remove this homeless person from the executive level," she said loud enough for the people inside the conference room to hear. She yanked my bag open, tossed my boarding pass across the floor, then stomped it under her heel until it was a crumpled scrap. "Don't you touch anything else, you filthy." She didn't even finish. I crouched down, calming my hands as I gathered my things, and that's when the live stream icon in someone's corner lit up. I wasn't angry at first. Anger doesn't change anything in 12 seconds, but staying calm gives you something no one expects: leverage. I reached for my ID, told her I had a 10 o'clock meeting, and she sneered. "This floor is for people who matter." Her voice had the casual cruelty of someone who'd practiced demeaning other people until it felt like virtue. People started to look. Phones rose like surveillance towers. A coworker, Nina, started recording. At first I thought she was being nosy. Then I realized she was being brave. Karen was theatrical. Right. She spread her arms, and the executives inside conference room A glanced out like they were watching a live TV show. One of them rolled his eyes. Another checked his watch time. Had suddenly become everyone's favorite moral compass. Then I did something simple. I pulled my wallet out slowly, let the light hit the edges, and when I opened it, an Amex Centurion peeked out. You could see the confusion ripple across her face. Homeless people don't normally have black cards. But confusion didn't equal humility, and humility was not Karen's language. Act 2. The turn. The twist came when I handed a business card to Karen, not aggressively, not with flourish, just with intention. She snatched it, read, and her expression turned from smug to pale. The card said Daniel Reed, Senior Partner, Harbor Ridge Partners, Lead Negotiator, Northfield Acquisition Operation Lighthouse. That last bit made her face go blank because Operation Lighthouse was an internal code name for a partnership only 5 people in both companies knew. At that moment, the hallway stopped being theater and became court. Nina's stream exploded a few hundred viewers, then thousands, and the grip of public scrutiny tightened like a tourniquet. The CEO came to the doorway, curious, then alarmed. The CFO stepped out, looking like someone who'd left his poker face in his other suit. Karen started to argue the point. "Anyone can make a card," she said, and David, a senior manager who'd earlier suggested the service elevator, watched like a man who had just realized he'd chosen a dangerous side. "Here's what I did. I put my hand on the folder I'd brought, the one with projections and analyses, and I let them choose. I could have shouted, stormed in, called the cops. Any of those would have felt satisfying for a second, like revenge. But I wanted leverage. I wanted accountability. So I opened the folder and pulled out 3 things that in that room mattered more than 1,000 apologies: a financial dependency analysis showing Northfield's Q4 revenue shortfall and cash runway, a legal risk memo outlining potential discrimination liabilities now that we had recorded evidence, and the confidential Harbor Ridge board memo confirming my appointment as an external strategic advisor with voting power. When you place data on a mahogany table, people listen. Numbers and documents translate outrage into consequences. The financials spelled it out without the Harbor Ridge investment. Northfield had a high probability of missing solvency thresholds, layoffs, missed payroll, even potential bankruptcy in a tight scenario. The legal memo spelled out exposure under state civil rights law. Recorded discrimination leads to corporate liability and personal liability for those who escalate false trespass claims. And the board memo that was the gut punch showed my appointment confidential but verifiable and a 21% voting stake on certain strategic decisions. Karen had humiliated someone who could vote on her employment status. Reality, when it hits white marble corridors, is loud. I could feel the power of the room shift like weather. People who had earlier watched with detached curiosity now had skin in the game. The CEO, Alicia Morgan, who had been pacing with polished composure, locked eyes with me. "How did we let this happen?" she asked, and that's when I stopped asking for permission and started presenting terms. I laid out 2 paths. Path A: Northfield accepts a set of non-negotiable conditions to move forward with Harbor Ridge: immediate personnel reviews, mandatory management bias training, external diversity audits, an anonymous reporting hotline, and technological monitoring of discriminatory interactions. Path B: they lose the deal. Harbor Ridge walks a competitor, steps in, and the company faces severe financial fallout. Those were not threats framed in anger, they were options backed by math and deadlines. You can't argue with a spreadsheet that shows an alternative buyer offering a less favorable deal that still leaves the company insolvent within a year. Act 3: the reckoning and the question. Karen tried to apologize. She said words I made a mistake. "I'm sorry, but apology without consequence is a neat little package that doesn't change the future." I wanted change. I wanted systems that made people check themselves before they acted. So I demanded accountability suspension pending investigation for those who escalated the incident, public acknowledgement, mandatory bias training for leadership, and flow-through monitoring that tied future funding to measurable cultural improvements. What followed was messy public but necessary. They paused the partnership signing. They accepted a partial immediate disbursement, a stopgap to stabilize payroll, but the rest of the funding was tied to milestones: training completion, implementation of a dignity monitoring system across floors, quarterly third-party audits. Karen was put on paid leave. David was demoted. A security protocol rewrite happened in a week. Nina, the colleague who had recorded the incident, was promoted to head of inclusive communications because someone needed to steward the change and because moral courage deserves reward. And yet, and this is the important bit, the ending wasn't tidy. 6 months later, numbers improved, stocks recovered, and the partnership closed. Northfield published new policy frameworks, and the company celebrated its turnaround. Karen found a job in a small firm across town, and David eventually spoke publicly about his lapse in judgment. But a camera doesn't film 99% of everyday discrimination. Most people never get a live audience when they're dismissed in a hallway when their credentials are assumed false because of the color of their skin or the cut of their clothes. Systems help, but they don't solve where there's no witness. So here's what I want you to feel. Humiliation is a personal wound, but it becomes a public emergency when institutions accept humiliation as normal. Turning a personal injury into institutional accountability is less about revenge and more about prevention. You don't need to be a board member to do it. You need to be willing to ask for the documentation to raise a voice, to be the Nina with the phone. The moment we make consequence routine, we make bias harder to hide. Before I go, let me leave you with a question that will sit in your throat for a while. If you filmed injustice, would you post it? If you saw someone being judged by how they looked, would you step in and risk being labeled nosy or disruptive? Or would you look away because it's easier? I'm not asking for heroics. I'm asking for humanity. Small acts stack. A recorded video, a shared post, a manager who insists on verification before calling security. Those are the things that change policy. If this hit you, if you've ever been dismissed or if you've ever dismissed someone, tell me what happened in the comments. Share a time you intervened or a time you wish you had. Tag 3 companies that need to stop pretending prejudice is a personality quirk and start treating it like the liability it is. And if you want more stories about how data beats discrimination and how ordinary people force institutions to get better, hit subscribe. Let's keep the conversation going, because quiet allows prejudice to grow and change. Begins with the noise we make together.